I guess I'll start by just introducing the system itself. So we can all see five point source speakers. These are point concentric speakers. So 8 inches and then a high frequency in the middle. And then we have a Adamson CS118 sub. So that is a powered sub. That is being controlled by array intelligence. It has been configured to run with the whole system. So this is probably the most basic setup of the Fletcher machine, because obviously from here we can build surrounds and rears to create a fully immersive room. We've chosen to do a frontal system today just to show off the main differences between stereo and frontal, and how things that we take for granted in mixing, like EQing, compression, we overdo them in stereo to squeeze things into the stereo field and shape them and make sure everything has its own little space to breathe. Those things can kind of be loosened a little bit, and those ideas can be pushed a bit further away on the desk, or the drawing board I should say, because having a frontal system and localization of objects means that you don't really have to cut away necessary information from something just so something else can be heard, especially if they're operating in 2 different localities across the frontal space. Right, what even is the Fletcher machine? So if you guys turn around, there is actually a little box next to the console. That is the Fletcher machine. That box enables us to have a wide coherent listening zone, which is exactly what this frontal system provides. This is pretty much what I just went through. Improved localization and unmasking of sound objects, which obviously I did just go through as well. Now the creative tools and enhanced connection with the audience, that is more to do with the surrounds in the room. So, you know, the first use of the surrounds is for room correction, so reverberation essentially. The reverb engine in the Fletcher machine is quite impressive. And then obviously the main application for fully submersive or immersive audio is a fully surround system where objects are flying in 3-dimensional space, in and out and around. It's quite impressive. There are distance algorithms going on, so things can actually go outside of the listening zone and back in, and you get that perception. We can feel a little bit of it today with some of the music that I'll play. You should be able to feel sounds move behind and in front of the frontal system. The depth of this is not huge, but it is enough to be noticeable. Obviously, that depth increases significantly when you add in surrounds and rears.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your slide.
Absolutely.
Please tell us what you mean by coherent and spatial unmasking.
Yeah. So that was basically what I was talking about with the EQ and compression.
Yeah, but how does coherent fit into that? And how does spatial unmasking fit into that?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, so by localizing sounds across the frontal system, so let's say something as complex as like a drum kit, yeah? So like EQing toms on a rack and floor, especially if you're in like a modern band with like 1600 toms, it's very hard to differentiate between each of the sounds. You have to do a lot of heavy chopping to ensure that each sound has its own space in the stereo field and is intelligible, right? With a frontal system, we can actually position the drums physically where they are in the space, which enables us to not have to make destructive EQ choices. We can unmask the sound, basically.
The ear has the ability to stop masking because it comes out from a different place.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And coherent, there's 1,000 definitions for coherent.
Yes. I would say intelligibility is probably a more appropriate word. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problems at all. I've obviously been through the frontal systems, fill systems and delay lines, so that is the first step of the surrounds, so that's a couple of extras on the side, and then obviously a delay line, and then immersive setups in 2D and 3D. So 2D is pretty much what we have here. We can create an immersive 2D setup here, or if we were to add sides and do full delay mode, which we'll go into in a moment, do fully immersive. So this is typical sweet spot of a stereo setup. Most of us are very familiar with this. Pretty much all of us would go to this position at a venue if we were seeing a band. I know I sit right here generally in pretty much every venue I go to because, yeah, I want to hear where it sounds good, right? those are the bad spots though. You know, we see, if I'm over this side, I hear mostly this. If something's panned over here, I'm not really getting that energy, and same goes over here with the other side. What the frontal system can do is eliminate that and widen the zone significantly. This then creates the same experience for this person, as this person, as this person, as this person. It is quite strange to stand in front of a frontal system when there is a sound localized to the far end speaker, but you can actually hear it from here if you listen hard enough. It's a very cool trick of the brain, psychoacoustics. Now, how the rendering modes work. So this is full delay. And we see the wavefront, and then extra delays added as we move down the system. This mode is particularly CPU heavy. I would only recommend it for immersive and creative functions because this allows us to do the inside, outside, sending objects around in a 3D space. But like I said, it's very CPU intensive. Minimum delay mode, which is pretty much the standard mode for operation for this unit. This takes away the initial delay calculations to the wavefront and starts the wavefront from the first point, this guy right here in the center, and then builds out from there and adds delay as necessary. So we have a 0 point and then onwards and onwards. Whereas in the previous mode, our 0 point is our listener. And then we have that distance to there and then to the other speakers. No delay mode is, as it suggests, no delay. It is just volume. So this saxophone is localized to this speaker and decreases in volume as we move away from it. Why is it called Fletcher Machine? I'm sure we're all familiar with Fletcher Munson curves. Yeah, cool. Harvey Fletcher was a genius. This setup was conducted in the 1930s. This is called the sound curtain. It placed microphones on one end and then wirelessly transmitted audio across the country in the States. I believe it was LA to New York, potentially, where, yeah, it was essentially the setup. So orchestra, individual telephone lines for each microphone. I believe they had to hijack telco to do it. And yeah, amplifiers on each telephone line and speakers on the other end on a wall of speakers. So this was the first frontal system ever. That's kind of how old the ideology of the technology is, essentially. So as we've talked about, object-based mixing, which is a move away from channel-based mixing. I mean, we use a lot of the same concepts of mixing desks with channel faders and things like that, but obviously panning is operated in a completely different format. Audio rendering, which is the full delay mode, so that is the more creative of the lot, and remote control software. So I might actually just flip to the remote just to show you what that looks like. Sorry, I'll hop in back here. So the remote is currently running with the system that's on at the moment. So we can go. Where are my snapshots gone? Hold on. Sorry guys, 1 second. There we go. So that is the control software for what we are currently hearing in the background now. There's just some ambience going on. We can see our frontal system, so our 5 speakers and then our sub. They are located. We are essentially standing on the 0 point. And yeah, we're enjoying those sounds moving around. If you want to have a closer look at the remote, I will leave it open on my computer, so please feel free to come down and have a look. Oh, clicker's not working now, that's good. Oh, that's embarrassing. Sorry, everybody. So this picture right here is a picture of the rack unit for Fletcher. We have a Traveller, which by name travels. It comes in a Pelican case, which is beautiful. This is obviously a rack unit. On the front here is basically what we just saw on the controller. This is a touch screen and all of that information can be accessed. The same remote control on my laptop, which is controlling the Traveller, can control this as well. And that can work on PC or on Mac. So now it comes in two formats, AVB MADI, which is what we are operating today, and Dante. Multiple sample rates. We are running at 96K today for various reasons, but obvious ones. And latency is super low, 1.3 milliseconds, which, yeah, is pretty much unnoticeable. Yeah, I don't know anyone that can notice that sort of latency with their brain. I'd be very interested to meet you if you can. This is the Fletcher Machine Virtual, which is the same engine, but instead of being housed in a box with an incredibly powerful processor, we are relying on our own computers to do it. It is free, and there are some limitations. There are some layered limitations and some input and output limitations, but by all accounts, 24 ins, 12 outs, I've used this since its release, approximately 12 months ago. And yes, it's very fun. My studio is set up at home for Fletcher. I have a 6-way circle in my studio instead of a traditional frontal system. I actually have surrounds, and it is really fun to send things around, especially when I'm jamming with friends, because we can kind of have our own little setups where we're localized to our own sounds, but then step back and hear everybody else. It's kind of cool. We have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, Windows and Mac, and then we've got another view of the controller here. So as you can see, a more complex frontal system where we sort of see some different things going on. That's our mixer. And lastly, channel strip, standard sort of stuff. The processing in this does sound extremely nice. I would say that especially the reverb engine is probably one of the strongest suits of the Fletcher. Yeah, there's a convolver and then a room generator as well. You can swap between the two. Snapshots are a really powerful way to control your scenes. So we'll be running snapshots today to prep for each tune. As we change songs, we'll change the snapshots and you can sort of see how the machine handles that. There are fade times where it can fade from 32 inputs and to your current speaker system and go down all the way to one input localized in the center. And it kind of just crossfades between the two, which is actually quite cool. The last bit on this slide at least anyway about the trajectory engine. So obviously we're in object-based mixing. There's no pan knobs anymore. You can't take an object and pan it around a room by turning a circle. You've got to place it in the space. Trajectories allow you to easily get movement very quickly. There are pre-built curves and shapes that you can just apply directly to any given object. You can link objects together so they react based on trajectories of other objects. And that's really where things start to get interesting, especially if you're into sound design and creativity. For installations and art galleries and things like that, it's really quite impressive. So I was talking to some of you earlier about sort of designing for this setup. It is very simple actually. Blueprint and Array Intelligence from Adamson are the recommended design softwares for this. It's essentially just ensuring there is even coverage across the room. The engine will handle the localization and the placement of objects in order so that we can understand them, basically. There's also Blacktrack, Stage Tracker, and Follow Me integration directly into the controller. There's also OSC spaces as well, so if you're a TouchOS guru, you can create your own templates for everything and go forward. The other addition to this that sort of partners with the controller is a VST plugin. This is particularly powerful for producers. I love running my modular synth rig into this guy and sending it all over my room. I've gotten to the point where I basically have individual channels flying everywhere all around the place and it's all clocked to my door and Automation's going crazy. I didn't really think I would be able to have that much locked in control over things, but yeah, this is able to provide me with all of the power I need to control the engine while I work in my door. The reverb, now, as I've mentioned twice, this is my favorite part of the system. I do feel like it's the biggest strength. So obviously looking at the room generator here, and this is in surround mode. So we have surround mode and frontal mode. Surround mode's obviously building a room space. Frontal mode is essentially a plate that sits across the frontal system. Pretty standard reverb controls on those. I think we all know what those are. So that is my very brief introduction to Fletcher Machine. If we have no questions, I would like to get on to listening to some tunes, and I'm sure you guys would too. So I'll jump back there, throw the remote up, and we'll have some fun.